We're going to do a video today, basically just a how-to video on Gen 1 rebuild of the Ford Raptor shocks. And basically what we have here, these are a pair of shocks that we got back from one of our shock exchanges that we do. And as you can see, this one has a lot more oil leaking out of it than the other one. We're going to rebuild this one just because I don't want you guys to sit there and have to, obviously this needs a shaft and everything. We're going to do a close-up on, I'm going to just show you how bad this is. This isn't going to be hard to see. Like, all the chrome is flaked off of this one. That's why what's on the inside is trying to get on the outside. So that shaft is bad. More than likely that's going to take out the rod guide. It might not, but it's definitely the rod guide bushing in there, the shaft bushing and stuff. So instead of cleaning this one, we're just going to work on this one. And I think this is a better deal anyway, because a lot of times people will see their shocks like this and think that they're not bad. And we already have one video out there of us checking the gas pressure in one of these shocks and just how compromised they are, even though they might look like new. So basically what you do is here's your port that they plugged from the factory on these, and it's just a little plastic pellet. And I'm not really doing this video to discourage people from trying to rebuild their own shocks, because you definitely can. But the problem is when you get these apart, what do you do if you have to replace an inner bypass tube? And when we do the shock exchange, we've changed what we used to do. We put brand new shafts in all of our shocks anymore. So just buying a seal kit and oil is not the way to rebuild these shocks. I mean, you can do it, but they're not going to last. And I just want to show people basically the right way to do it, and then you can determine at that point if you want to do it or not. But I'm not going to waste a bunch of time cleaning all this stuff. That's obviously something that we do. But even this one, you can see just the oil and the dirt that's got on there. And so, like I said, we don't even refinish the shafts anymore. We put brand new shafts in the shocks, and that way they're mechanically brand new when you get them from us. Basically, we're going to crack this port open here, and more than likely there's going to be some yellowish green fluid come out, if there's any gas left in the shock at all. Yep, here it comes. That's the number one. That is the worst sign in the world, because the only thing that should be in here is nitrogen. So what can make this happen is the shock has gotten low on gas pressure. The O-ring on the internal floating piston in here hasn't been able to keep. So what happens when they get low on gas pressure is the shock will start to cavitate, and it'll do a couple different things. It can make the shock equalize, where the nitrogen gets up here in the oil, and vice versa. The oil gets down in here. There shouldn't be any oil in here. So there's still nitrogen in here, but it's not much. It's not enough. That is the kind of the first thing that you do when you take these apart. And then that's just this little rubber pellet that's been expected to hold nitrogen for, I mean, if this is a 2014, it's been trying to hold nitrogen for 11 years now. I'll get this top cleaned up here, and as you can see, this has been leaking. So this shaft is, we'll do a close-up of it later and just show you how many scratches are in it. And the reason we don't refinish them anymore is because there's only 7/1000ths of an inch of chrome on here. So if you take off 3 or 4 thousandths when you're refinishing it, there's only 3 or 4 thousandths left, and it's just they just end up scratching easier than they did when they were brand new with 7/1000ths of an inch of chrome. So I always break the bleed screws loose here, clean them out good because there's grease down in them. I'm just blowing the holes out so I can get my Allen wrench in there and break them loose. So I got these broke loose, and the other reason you want to break these loose before you take the rod guide out of here is it'll tell you if the shock is equalized and there's any nitrogen in here, because if that's pressurized and you go and take this rod guide loose, you're gonna have a mess. So these are good. The other thing, the next thing I do is just, I want to get these back down flush, because the easiest way to get this apart is to give it a good wrap here with a, we use a bronze hammer. This isn't hurting anything on the rod guide, it's just, they just get stuck in here, and sometimes we'll just use a cheater on them, just a longer tube here. Break it loose like that. Then you just take it loose. So I got that loose, bring it out. And like I said, I don't even look at the shaft on Gen 1s or anything like that anymore. I'm gonna chuck them. So we'll get that one cleaned up a little bit more later, but I want to show you what this oil looks like, because it looks disgusting and it smells even worse. And there's your bypass. I'm just holding the inner bypass tube, but that's, and there's your inner bypass tube. And this is something that it can also go bad, especially on these shocks that have a lot of oil leaked out of them. Like that shock down there with all the oil on the outside. Basically, the oil is a lubricant as well. So I grabbed one of the inner bypass tubes that we have had to replace, and you can see this thing was basically dry in there. There was no oil in there. And then we'll get a look down inside the tube here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but you'll see just wear marks, and then there's a spot where the shaft was spending most of its time, because it's not in full travel all the time. When you're driving down the road, they're probably moving about that far. So anyway, if these go bad, you have to replace that when you put it back together. So that's just another one of the parts that go bad. Next, what I do is take that inner bypass tube out, and I'll just set that in there, let it drain, wipe this off a little bit. We'll clean all these up more when we put them back together, but I just try to get as much oil off right away so it doesn't make such a mess. You just take this little cap off on the bottom, and then when you take this O-ring off, a lot of times you'll see sometimes there's scratches in here where the O-ring is sitting, but we'll clean all that up on our lathe, polish it, and get it so that you want that cleaned up, because the O-ring has to seal on it. So the next thing that I do after I take all that stuff out, you don't have to do it in this order. Sometimes I do it in a different order, but there's a retaining ring in here, and basically it looks like that. But what you want to do when you're taking these out, you don't want to push down on this end or that end. You want to push down on, we go straight across from there, because these are sharp, and this bottom piece in here is aluminum. So if you push that down, it's going to scratch that aluminum inside, and that's a lot of times what's happened even on the original, whoever built it originally, a lot of times they put this ring down in there, put it down about in here, and when they gas it up, that thing slides up and stops the floating piston. Well, this thing, as it went up, it scratches the inside of the tube. So I just find the open end, you can hear it right there, and I just go straight across from it and push it down. So you'll see how I have the open end facing up on that retaining ring, and then I'll just grab I've got a snap on deal here, and I just grab it and pull it straight up so I'm not scratching that inner bypass tube. And I'll show you what I do next is blow the IFP out of there. I just call it a floating piston, but the technical term is IFP. And then as you can see down in here, that's where all that oil was that came out when I took the hyper screw out. So when I took that out, that's where all the oil was, and it should be dry. There shouldn't be anything in there. So I'm gonna let that sit there for a second, let it dry. The next thing we do is just basically take all this apart, replace all the O-rings, the wipers, the seals, and everything in there. And we've got all the valvings for these. We got them from Fox. And then we just basically lay all of our shims out here, and then we'll take the caliper to all these, make sure that they're right, and everything gets replaced. I would set these out in the order that you take them off. I'm just doing it the way I do it, but that way when you go to put it back together, you start here, you follow it up, and put your nut on. But as you can see, like, I've seen people do these before and not even take any of these apart, and I mean, as you can see, my hands are just filthy. So when we put them back together, you want to make sure that they're clean. This is a perfect example of a shock that doesn't have all the shims it should have. So we're missing there should be 4 of this diameter shim right here. So the only reason I know that is because we've taken up thousands of them apart. So I'm going to take these out and then just wash this up quick. You don't have to watch me do that, but you want to get like a 90-degree pick. I use snap-on ones, and make sure they're sharp. It's just like using a dull knife. You'll cut yourself way worse with a dull knife than you will a sharp one. Just like if you got a dull pick, you'll stick it farther in your hand here than you will if you got a sharp one. So, and you don't want to, here's another thing you don't want to do. You don't want to go through, this is something we see all the time when we take them apart when somebody else has rebuilt them. They stick through the seal and jab into this is aluminum, and if you jab into that and put a scratch in it, it's going to leak. The other thing that we put in every shock as well is this inner bushing, and the reason we do it is because that gets wore. And as you can see right here, it's actually through the coating, and it's going to be metal on metal, so that's just going to be shaving the chrome off of your new shaft if you don't have it looking like this all the way around. So as you can see, like I said right there, it's shiny, it's through that. So we also knock that out, and that's another one of them things. If you want them to last, that's the stuff that you have to do. And I don't even know if this rod guide's going to be any good, because there's a lot of corrosion in here, and once it starts eating into the, I'm just lightly hitting that with a pick just to get the stuff out of there to look at it. It's not looking real good right now, but yeah, there's just too much pitting in here for me. If it needs to be replaced, it gets replaced. So we'll you can see like the outer ring out here where the wiper goes is nice and blue. The inner part there, you can see pitting, and it's not going to get any better, and it's not supposed to have that in there. I mean, that's not going to seal. So we'll take the bleed screws out of here and the balls, the bleed balls in there. Basically that's what's under here. Under each one of these bleed screws is a ball, and then that sits down there in the bottom of the rod guide and seals off the oil so it won't leak. And you'll see both of the balls are right there. So this is junk. I guess I'll show you how I knock those bushings out of there, but I'm going to grab a new rod guide. So basically we keep all the new parts on hand, but this is another reason why it just makes it really hard to rebuild these yourself. If you don't have the parts to do it right, that's just going to leak. You could put a new shaft in that and it wouldn't matter, because that bushing, these are brand new bushings that we put in here. We've just got some soft jaws in our, it's just a little angle aluminum that I've made. And the thing that works best on these is just to heat it up with a torch quick. just go in a lot easier. You just want to make sure that's flush, and then the other thing I do is just make sure it goes on. If you don't warm them up, sometimes they get in there a little bit. They just don't go in flush, and they'll be tight on the rod guide. So these are good to go. I'm just going to put my check balls in here, run it back down. And I don't tighten them just because we're going to loosen them when we put the shock together and bleed it after it's done. But this is how we take them out. I would say we probably go through 100 of these a year. You got to get them pretty hot to get them to come out. To get them to come out easy. Otherwise, you just end up beating it up. So, like if this was a rod guide that I was gonna save, this is how I would do it, and then I would just put that bushing right back in. But there's just you just got to hit the lip of it here. There we go. Basically, that's junk. And then I would take this over to our bucket of water, cool it off, and put that new bushing in just like I did there. But that's junk. So now I've already got the new shaft out and ready to put. So basically what's happened is that bushing that I just took out of there, that's riding on there all the time. Well, there's friction there. It's gonna take chrome, and it's gonna once they start to push oil, dirt gets on there, and that's where you get your vertical scratches from. Just it's almost like a piece of sandpaper on there when the shaft is going in and out of the shock. So anyway, and you can see like from here to here how much shinier that is in that area where my thumb is. That's where it's spending most of its time. And there's always a side load on these Raptor shocks. On anytime you have a coil spring on anything, there's a side load on it. So they just have to be replaced. If you don't, they're not going to last. So the next thing I'm going to do real quick is just put the seals in. And we always put just a little bit of grease in here just to help the seals go back in there nice. And basically the seals, there's a right way and a wrong way to put them back in. I've seen people put them in upside down and get a lip folded over because they don't have the right tool. So I'm just putting the middle one in here. And then we've got a bullet here that we use. Put the shaft on. I always put a little bit of grease on this leading edge here just to make sure that you don't scratch a seal when it goes on. These are the two O-rings that go on there as well. And then that, we just slide it right on. Easy as can be. So what I do, I think this sets us apart as far as how we do it, but there was oil in here for a reason. And if you don't find out why, it will just happen again. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to clean this out really good, get the oil out of there, and then I've got a mirror rigged up that I use kind of like a scope. And this is just brake clean that I'm going to spray in here just so I can get it cleaned out even better. And this doesn't have to be spotless right now because I'm not putting it back together yet. It'll be spotless when we go back to assemble it. But basically what I do next is I've got just an extendable mirror here and this light, and what I'm looking for is scratches on the cylinder wall of this shock, because if there's scratches in there, no O-ring is going to hold it. So what we're going to do, there's some wear in here. There isn't any scratches, but what I'm going to show you is how if there are scratches, what we do. And I'm going to basically, we take the body off, but it's extra work, but if you don't do it, it's just going to leak. So there's a set screw in the side of the perch here, and hopefully it'll come loose. If it doesn't, which it doesn't look like it's gonna, sometimes tapping on that, no. So basically what we have to do is we're gonna push this off on the press and we'll drill and tap this out, and then we'll take that body off. We took it over to the press, pushed this perch off of here, and this is the kind of corrosion that you end up with inside of here. That's why your set screw right there won't come out. So this is just all corrosion underneath the spring perch here. That's still really hot. But basically what I'm going to do right now is grab a pipe wrench, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to take this body off to get in there and show you why that was leaking. And I use a pipe wrench on this just because to my knowledge, it'll make a tool to hold the body. It's not a pain in the butt. So I just put the pipe wrench on there. This is all covered up after you get it back together and you put this perch back on there, so you're not hurting anything. But I just usually give it a good, try to get it broke loose, because there's a ton of red Loctite here. So I just face is getting red because it's hard. So this is your body. This is the bottom piece that I was talking to you about, and this one isn't terrible. I don't see any scratches on here per se, but you can see the wear where the anodization is worn off. So what we do is we hone these. This one actually wouldn't be that bad. These aren't the scratches that I'm worried about. This is still just really smooth. It just wore the anodization off of there. So, but in the event that one of them would have some scratches in it, we have a hone that we take in here and we just get the scratches out, smooth it out, and then your O-ring will seal. Because if you have a scratch in the side of this, the oil is just going to leak past it again. I just wanted to show you what we do sometimes on these when they're like that. So, but it does make it a lot easier to clean in here now when you have that body off there and everything. And it does make the assembly easier too, because we can just get right at the floating piston there and put the Schrader valve in and everything. So I'm gonna drill this and tap it. Again, we'll just do a little time lapse here. We'll just probably put it all back together and maybe tell you a little bit about how we did it and stuff at the end. Basically what I'm doing here is just getting those lines and everything that was where that O-ring is supposed to sit. We're getting that cleaned up so the O-ring can seal properly. Oh yeah, that's the way she's supposed to look. As the time lapse will show, when we took this body off, cleaned out the where the IFP goes in here. Basically it's a pressure tube is what it is. The rear shocks have the short, it's called the reservoir on the back. That's the short tube, but anyway, that's what holds the gas pressure. I took this spring perch off. We had to drill and tap the set screw in the side to keep it here, put it all back together. The way we do these is we do it with an oil volume. Some shocks we rebuild, we set the IFP depth in there. Sometimes we use an oil volume. But anyway, basically everything is ready to go here. Brand new piston, band, O-ring underneath there. All the shims are cleaned. All new seals, O-rings in the rod guide. Brand new rod guide, brand new shaft. And basically I'm just when we do this, I just put the put it down in the inner bypass tube there and just get it down in the oil on these. That's what the bleed screws are for. When we gas it up, it'll push the oil up to the bleed screws here, and then when we bleed it, we'll get all the air out of the oil. Don't know, and we did a little time lapse in a slow motion video of, we have a 20-ton press out there, and I'll show you here in a second what happens after I get this tight. Basically, you get all this corrosion on the inside of the spring perch here, and I mean, we have to use a MAP gas torch to, even it's a 20-ton press, but it sounds like a bomb goes off in here sometimes when that. So if you want to move them to mid perch, that's the right way to do it as well. I mean, we get them all the time where people have just hit them with a hammer and just destroyed the bottom side of this. But anyway, there was I don't know if you had, in the time lapse, you know, this is a bad inner bypass tube that we've replaced in another shop, but I looked at all that. We shined up the floating piston where the O-ring sits, and then the bottom cap where this goes, we put that on the lathe, cleaned up all them surfaces so the O-rings will seal. These Gen 1 shocks, I've said this before, we've got a video out there showing you what the gas pressure is supposed to be, but 250 psi, and the bleed screws are tight. I push this down, the shaft down through the piston so the oil can go through the main piston and get all the air out of there, because when you put the shims on there and tighten it down, there's basically it traps air in there, so you gotta put it in there, put it down in oil and push it down so oil goes through the piston and gets it. So basically what it's doing right now, all the air is coming up here to the top. So, and you'll see the shaft, it'll start to extend. And there it's at 250. I'm not gonna, well, it's probably about 300, but I'm not gonna, we'll let you look at this when we do it, because you'll see what is going on here. It's kind of cool because we're gonna put 300 pounds in here. My regulator's just set right at 300, so we got 300 in there. When we bleed this, you'll see the gas pressure go down a little bit, and the reason that is because the floating piston is going to move up in here. So the floating piston is, let's just say it's right here. As we bleed the air out, the floating piston is pushing the oil in the air towards the top. So you should see this, it's right at 300. You should see it go down a little bit. We'll just get a rag and you'll hear one side usually has way more air come out of it than the other. I don't know if you heard it, but it went shh. And I just usually crack it. You're not losing much. I mean, probably just a couple of milliliters here, but that's solid oil now. Both of them are solid, just clear, brand new oil. And then there's your, see, it didn't go down much, but that's not leaking. It's just, it's at about like 295 now. But the reason is the volume that you had in here is larger now. So anyway, we'll let this down. I always just take the gauge off at 260. And then the other thing that we do is we turn the perches so the Schrader valve can always be facing the tire. Otherwise, if you don't turn them, and when we turn them, so the SVT logo here, so this is going to be, if this is on the truck, this is going to be a left front. The Schrader valve is going to be pointing towards you, and the SVT logo that's supposed to be facing the front of the truck is there. On the other side, we'll turn this over to this side because it's going to be a right front. But that way you don't have to get underneath the truck to check the gas pressure. But the other thing that we do is we check all the shocks to make sure that they're not leaking out of the Schrader valve. Those bubbles that you're seeing, that's just coming out of the the bushing here, it'll quit. It's just air that's trapped inside that bushing. But there's no way that nitrogen could be coming out of there anyways. But this is where we're looking here, is the Schrader valve. Make sure the needle isn't leaking or anything like that, and she's good to go. That's how you build a Gen 1 Ford Raptor shock. Like I said, I'm not doing this to discourage people from trying to rebuild them on your own, but I want to make sure if you are doing it that you're doing it the right way. This is how we do it. Like I said, this shock, other than this piece, your spring perch, mechanically this shock is brand new. So we want them to last you 50 to 75,000 miles or more. We have customers that have put 80, 85,000 on them. So that's how you do it.